Since my last video, I've done some research on exactly how severe the damage can be to our hearts long term and how severe the damage can be to our brains long term. And I've made some progress. I've found some things that are relevant, particularly in regards to the heart, specific ways that it's damaging the heart and why there's a potential for this to be long term, because there's scar tissue being formed and there's a increased fibrosis. Now with the brain, I haven't found specific diagnostic things that are being damaged. There's a lot, but I'm in over my head on that one. So I won't try to describe that. But what I did find about the brain was some data on how frequently there is brain damage at 3 months after diagnosis. Like in the previous video, I described the data on the heart damage at 60 to 90 days, which was 78%. I'd really like to see some information on the 22% who did not have heart damage, if they've been able to assemble any data on what are these people doing different, what's different about them, what's different about their immune system, that they didn't have evidence of heart damage. So the data on the brain, this is once again an MRI at 3 months. Okay, so it says findings in this follow-up stage, neurological symptoms were presented in 59% COVID-19 patients. This was the study was on 60 recovered. And it says during SARS-CoV-2 infection, 41 out of 60, that's 68%, had neurological symptoms, and over 50% recovered patients still had symptoms 3 months later. Also in the same paper, it was accepted July 16th. So I don't know what date it was published online. In this prospective study, volumetric and microstructural abnormalities were detected mainly in the central olfactory cortices, partial white matter in the right hemisphere from recovered COVID-19 patients, providing new evidence to the neurological damage of SARS-CoV-2. The abnormalities in these brain areas might cause long-term burden to COVID-19 patients after recovery, which was thus worth public attention. Okay. Now, so we've got evidence about the potential long-term damage on both the heart and the brain. So now let's get into the actual damage going on in the heart. This is the original study that caused so much concern by Valentina Puntman, MD, PhD. Now here's some of the things. I did a find in this for SCAR and for gadolinium enhancement, late gadolinium enhancement. And so I did a find with a control F. For those people who aren't familiar, that's a really quick way to get through a publication for specific words. It'll tell you how many words they are, and it'll highlight them. And you can just hit the enter button and go to each one. In a small study of recovered patients with ongoing cardiac symptoms, cardiovascular magnetic resonance, CMR, imaging revealed cardiac involvement in 58% of patients consisting of myocardial edema and scar by late Gadolinium Enhancement. That's a LGE. We're going to come across that term quite a bit. So the gadolinium enhancement is it's performed 10 minutes after administration of 0.1 millimeter of body weight of gadobutrol. And this gives them a different enhancement so they can see scar tissue and fibrosis. And that's what really caught my attention, scar tissue, because that sounds like a long term. So also in this publication, unlike these previous studies, our findings reveal that significant cardiac involvement occurs independently of the severity of original presentation and persists beyond the period of acute presentation, with no significant trend toward reduction of imaging or serological findings during the recovery period. Our findings may provide an indication of potentially considerable burden of inflammatory disease in large and growing parts of the population and urgently require confirmation in a large cohort. Non-ischemic patterns of myocardial AGE are mainly observed in patients with acute or healed myocarditis and have been strongly linked to reduced outcome. Importantly, volume and function have consistently been demonstrated to be less relevant for predicting outcome than LGE and mapping, highlighting the relevance of the more sensitive markers of early cardiac damage. So, as far as an overall strategy, I'd like to bring up the strategy that Alex Honnold adopted when he did that first free solo of El Capitan. And we can go to, for those people who get nervous and anxious about things like this and they start worrying, we can go to the videos online. Some of them are just like 2 or 3 minutes, and listen to Alex as he described the preparations he made for doing this. The most difficult part of the climb was about 2,000 foot up. He actually had 3 different ways to get through that difficult section. And what he did to prepare was he rappelled down from the top of El Capitan and worked through those sections to make sure he was familiar with every little intricacy. And there was one section called the boulder move where there were 2 ways to do that. He could do this thumb undercling, and then he has to do some little dicey stepping, and then he has to switch thumbs. For those of you have never done a thumb undercling, I've never done one. The only thing I can figure out, it must have had something to do with the bulk, because it's a diagonal undercling too. It's not straight up and down. I mean, I actually like underclings because with underclings, you can lock your arm and take a break. You can get a little bit of a rest. So anyway, he's got to switch thumbs, right? And then he's got to do a little bit of footwork and then reach up to a much better hold. And then another way, he calls, I think it's the karate kick, he steps far out with his left foot, which is when he did the climb, that's how he eventually did it. But there was another way. He could have skipped that section and gone what they call the Teflon corner, which is like it's an inside corner, like just comes together. And you can imagine what they're giving it the name Teflon. It's pretty slippery, you know. But anyway, this is one of the most enormous achievements, I think, for a person ever in the history of the world, you know, doing a climb at this difficulty, this close to his limit. This is really an achievement. And then we can learn from his mental preparations. Now, the unfortunate thing is he got to try and experiment and go through these moves over and over. We don't have that choice. We have to it'd be kind of like Alex would have to view other people doing the climb from the distance, you know, with binoculars and learn from their mistakes. that's where we are. We can see what's happening to other people and then hopefully, make preparations like he did by looking at the most difficult parts. And this is what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to look at the most difficult parts. And I hope this makes sense, as a basic strategy, because I see in the media all the time these very knowledgeable people, very well educated epidemiologists, engineers, and somehow when they say asymptomatic or they say mild symptoms or they didn't even go to the hospital, they didn't even know they had it, somehow now these people are just all part of the herd immunity. That's not what the science is saying. I was thinking along that line. I shouldn't really be that hard on them for a while. That it's like the cold, it's like the flu. It just goes away. And now another thing I'm seeing is people are focusing on the T cell response of our immune system because the antibodies aren't that long. Well, the T cell aspect of our immune system has a big impact, and some studies are showing, like with other coronavirus, they were still T cells involved in the memory. They recall the virus so they can quickly, 17 years later. But I think that since we're seeing the damage 60, 90 days afterward, that kind of fades into the background right now. It's not, so anyway, that's my approach. That's my strategy. Go after the hardest, most difficult, the most challenging, the things that can do the most damage, and just learn everything we can about them. So if somebody else knows more about the brain damage, by all means, make some comments here, and we'll turn this into a team effort. I will learn about it as time goes by. Oh, actually, this publication, this is where they're doing, this was from August 7th. They're doing machine learning. This paper begins by presenting the 4 pathways that can lead to heart and brain injuries following COVID-19 infection. Such symptoms include myocardial injury, hypoxia, plaque rupture, erythemas, venous thromboembolism, coronary thrombosis, encephalitis, ischemia, inflammation, and lung injury. So they're reviewing the use of artificial intelligence also. Anyway, we can make some headway on this, I'm sure, those of us that have time. Now, here's a couple of publications about the late gadolinium enhancement. Now, this they used by adding another method, scintigraphy, that enhanced the predictive clinical outcome. Okay, so that's another one. Here's another one using the late gadolinium enhancement, the LGE. This is from January 9th, 2019. Okay, so I've covered that. Now I want to get back to the specific markers because the galectin-3 is helpful for brain damage and as a therapeutic target. So I reviewed the galectin-3 for the heart, for those who didn't see my first video, galectin-3 it's approved by the FDA to measure risk of heart failure. Now here's the data that I collected. So if people need to review this, they can just stop it and pause it and see they can see the SII at the top. And the next one down will be the LMR. And then down there somewhere is the galectin-3. The second from the bottom is the galectin-3. So now what I did also to help understand more clearly the interventions, this is December, then this is January. You can see the SII improved substantially. It went down. And the LMR improved substantially. Well, 10 days before that, that's when I started the modified citrus pectin at the maximum dose. Well, I didn't have at the time, the galectin-3. So this had improved so much that I lowered the dose, right? And then when I did my next test, those markers had both gotten significantly worse, and now I had my first galectin-3 measurements. Well, the galectin-3 looked really good. So I kept it the dose for when it's between 9 and 12, they're recommending 5 grams a day. So that's what I did. So now at the next test, 2 of the markers improved again, but the galectin-3 kept getting worse. So I increased the dose again. I think I went up to 10 grams then. Then the other 2 markers continued to improve, but the galectin-3 once again continued to get worse. So I upped the dose again. I went up to 15 grams. And then somewhere around this point, I'm not exactly sure when, I may be able to find that, I made the liposomal galectin-3 with the hinocuol at a 9-to-1 ratio. I think somebody has a patent on that ratio. But so then 2 months after I went to the liposomal, all 3 markers have improved significantly, including the galectin-3 dropped over 20%. I think it dropped 23%. And the SII is now in a very safe zone at 372. And the LMR is at a 3.25, which is the highest it's been in about 2 years. Even better would be try to get it up over 5.0. That's considered a pretty safe zone for low risk of cancer. So I've reviewed the personal data I've been collecting, which may be cutting edge. And like I said, I got into this because it's those markers are helpful for prostate cancer risk. And it just turns out that they're also helpful for the things we're concerned about with COVID-19. So let me see, I covered that already. I don't need that. So just here are some publications that show the use of modified citrus pectin. I highlighted the area where they mention modified citrus pectin. And this is one more. And then here's one with hinocuol. Now here's one about galectin-3 in the treatment of COVID-19. Pretty interesting. So then I went to LabCorp and tried to dig out what they were actually saying about the test. I think I've seen the test for like $105, but that wasn't LabCorp. That was where you get the results in a couple hours. So galectin-3 levels greater than 17.8 are present in a proportion of patients with certain NYHA class 2 to 4. Such elevated levels are associated with a more progressive form of heart failure, resulting in an increased hazard for death or hospitalization. So 17.8, blockade of galectin-3 prevents organ fibrosis. Galectin-3 has been implicated in a variety of biological processes. Galectin-3 reflects the presence of specific underlying disease processes and are not affected by the degree of decompensation. Hence, galectin-3 levels, once elevated, remain generally constant and do not fluctuate with signs and symptoms of heart failure. That would put some pressure on us to keep it from becoming elevated in the first place. Now, then I found this is an Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation publication. Elevated galectin-3 is associated with cognitive decline. Galectin-3 inhibition may reduce pathological microglial neuroinflammation. Elevated galectin-3 is a prognostic marker for reduced heart function, fibrotic disease, poor prognosis, and mortality. Inhibitors show potential benefit for fibrotic disease in early clinical trials. So they mentioned 3 inhibitors, one which is modified citrus pectin, the other is belapectin, which is it's been tested in clinical trials for cancer, psoriasis, and NASH. Then there's another supplement called TD139, and it's being developed by Galacto Biotech. Elevated galectin-3 is associated with cognitive decline. Galectin-3 inhibition may reduce pathological microglial neuroinflammation. So that's where the use of the modified citrus pectin is such a, in my opinion, is an extremely front burner item for everybody to look into and consider. Okay, now this was published in Nature Reviews on in August. Nature is one of the most is usually the highest ranked journal in all the medical journals. Now they say together these studies provide clear evidence of central nervous system damage in patients with COVID-19. So they were reviewing 3 studies. Now is a good time for me to get into the other aspect of why I'm making these presentations is how we can improve our immune function so we're more able to fight this virus off in the first place. And there's been, there were 3 publications last August in Cell, and also in that same issue with Cell, they're about fasting. The Walter Longo, he's one of the most leading experts in the world on fasting, intermittent fasting, fasting mimicking diets. He's been interviewed by Rhonda Patrick. When fasting gets tough, the tough immune cells get going or die. Now, that was in the same issue as these 3 other publications. Now, let me, especially for the people without a strong science background, most people know that how exercise strengthens muscles. It's by you're actually tearing them down, you're injuring them, and then the body says, well, I better make these muscles bigger and stronger. Well, there's a term for that type of stress. It's called hormesis. And this applies to many things in our body. A certain amount of stress is beneficial. So like with the muscles, if we stress too much, we might damage them. We might pull a muscle, strain them. They're not ready yet for that type of stress. Well, the same with fasting does to many of the processes in our cells in a similar way that exercise does to our muscles. That certain amount of stress strengthens a whole bunch of fundamental pathways. And this has been going on for several million years. Our body's not only used to this, it's dependent on it for optimum health. And I mentioned in the first video that they need to get rid of all the omega-6 refined seed oils, because that interferes with our appetite signaling. So we're hungry all the time. And then as we restore our appetite signaling, it makes it easy to lose weight. You're not hungry. You just don't eat. Some guy in the UK, I think he went 380 days fasting under the supervision of doctors and medical professionals. He just took some vitamins and minerals and he was fine. No, I'm not recommending we go that long. So these 3 studies in Cell, you start. So this, the bone marrow protects and optimizes immunological memory during dietary restriction. During fasting, many of the immune cells migrate to the bone marrow. Memory T cells display enhanced protective function during dietary restriction. Pretty interesting, huh? Now I didn't highlight anything. I'm trying to just hit on the major highlights. I didn't highlight. Yes, I did. Oh, this is too long. Multiple studies have defined the beneficial effects of fasting or calorie restriction regarding metabolic disease in overnutrition obesity models. Okay, well, that's too long. I'm not going to read more of that one. But here's the third study that I mentioned. And Cell is one of the most reputable journals in this area. Dietary intake regulates the circulating inflammatory monocyte pool. Fasting also reduces monocyte metabolic and inflammatory activity. Fasting improves inflammatory diseases without compromising antimicrobial immunity. Now, it may have been in this study where they tested, I think it was mice or rats with some kind of a bacteria. And in the fasted state, they wiped the bacteria out in 2 days, where in a non-fasted state, it took 7 days. Maybe it was 5 days. It was roughly half the time. Let's see what else did I. Fasting as part of physiological sickness behavior can even be beneficial in antimicrobial immunity. Okay. So here is some good news. These people have been studying nanobodies. Apparently they have 2 billion nanobodies. Nanobody is like a manufactured minuscule antibody. And they included, the Pasteur Institute got involved in this publication. So through various methods, they narrowed down the number of nanobodies to help with COVID-19, and then found ways to enhance their effectiveness. And then finally, so they're referring to this as a type of molecular PEA, where you use some type of aerosol spray, and that will neutralize the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And they've got it worked out to a pretty high degree. If they get an extremely high effectiveness, like the vaccines, even if the vaccines are less than 50% effective, I think the last year's flu vaccine was like about a third. They're still going to, distribute it. This would be great if this was like 99.999% effective, something like that. Well, maybe that's wishful thinking. But anyway, that's a little bit of good news. I know most of the. Now, also, I found a website a few days ago. I'm going to schedule an appointment here, even though they don't accept insurance. I guess I'll have to put it on my credit card. God, I can't believe years ago the credit cards were 1 or 2% over prime. Now it's like double or triple or quadruple or quintuple prime is the credit. And the banks were making plenty of money. They make, and now today a lot of the banks, they don't pay any taxes. They have so much money they dump it into stock buybacks. They don't know what to do with it all. Or they have, I think one company has a war chest of like $350 billion. They basically triple the price of their product. Instead of marking it up 3% or 30%, they mark it up 300%. And anyway, this is Proactive Wellness Centers. It's in Vienna, Virginia. And there's a lot of blog posts there. She posted this in, I can't think of her name, in April. And part of the reason I'm going to go see her is to get all these I want to see how strong my immune system is. So there's 2 tests that they perform. One is the immunoglobulin G, subclasses 1 to 4. And the other test is the immunoglobulins quantitative IgA, IgG, IgM test. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else here I highlighted. Yeah, she mentions 13 things, reviews them briefly, including things like quercetin, exercise, N-acetylcysteine, zinc, phosphatidylcholine, interesting, glutathione. And these are just general, this is written in April, these are just general ways to help our immune system. So then once I get some more information and get some, I'll report here on what happens. So as far as brain health, there's a few other ideas to here's some of the books that I read over the years and applied. I mean, there's a really valuable information in these books. Like I discovered in this one that the reason why they use these he's a psychologist, he's a PhD also, Brent Courtright. The reason they the antidepressant drugs, they impact the hormones in our body within hours, but we don't see an impact on the depression for like 2 or 3 months. It's because it takes 2 or 3 months for new synapses to be created. I think Dr. Bredesen said in a recent interview with Dr. Gundry, I think it was just a couple days ago, I think there's 60 trillion synapses. So this is Dr. Bredesen's most recent book, which I haven't read yet. I'm trying to find time to read it. But anyway, there's great ideas in these books. Now, there's a few other things that I discovered on my own that I'm always looking for things that are that people on a low budget can afford. Well, these Iranian scientists had a publication, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. They had gone through these ancient Persian texts and found out that the doctors back then were treating Alzheimer's, but they had a different name for it. I can't think of the name they had. I had it in there for a couple days. But anyway, they were using almonds, walnuts, and hazelnuts. And then if you go through the literature, you'll see the hazelnuts really stand out. So you can get the hazelnut oil, almond oil, walnut oil are fragile oils. Need to keep them refrigerated. They're on Dr. Gundry's yes list, but they're fragile, so you can't cook with them. But you can use the oils or I get the nuts. I put the nuts in now in my flaxseed muffins. I put the nuts in my homemade ice cream. which is delicious. And, I make it without any carbs, carb free, and it's delicious. But the hazelnuts, the walnuts, the almonds, that's what they were treating Alzheimer's with years ago in some Persian countries. So I think that's pretty interesting. And it's something we can use now. The walnuts are, walnut oil, excellent for the heart. Two other things, excellent for the heart. Aged garlic extract, right? Or garlic. And pomegranate seed oil. Pomegranate seed oil. It's in literature. It's 12 drops twice a day. And the walnut oil is 1 tablespoon per day with meals. So if you eat 3 meals, if you're still eating 3 meals, you haven't gone keto yet, then take 1 teaspoon with each meal. And there's things in the walnut oil that'll reduce the byproducts of the that are created during the metabolism, toxic byproducts, and reduce the impact on your arteries, help keep your arteries clean. Okay, so there's a few other things. I didn't show this fully last time. That was the galectin-3 predicts new onset heart failure, systematic review and meta-analysis. This may have been the one where they found if your SII is over 551, you're clearly in an elevated risk. Here's this is the Dr. Gundry publication about the diet changes that help so much with our heart health. And then here's a few things that this is I was talking about the T cells. This is why antibodies may not be the key to beating coronavirus. This is interesting. I think one of these, this is surveillance testing of nursing homes. And this is so like I said, not all patients develop protective antibodies, and one of these studies showed the load that you get on your initial infection. There's evidence that has an impact on how severe the disease gets to be, and that makes sense. The quicker your immune system can, and more effectively, get going and stopping this, But I just want to reinforce the point that even if the T cells are making up for the reduced antibody presence, where it only lasts, the half-life's about 3 months, and then it drops exponentially, we're seeing these signs of damage. They're clearly there, irregardless, So I hope this helps some with everybody to get working on this, and thank you for listening.